Now, a year ago, Melanie Harwood met the UN's head of training and research at a dinner. It was then that she decided she wanted to train climate change teachers in UK schools. She was already involved in the education sector, and so started a project to create bespoke training for teachers. A year on, that teaching training has United Nations backing. In almost 3,000 UK schools, there are now UN-accredited teachers, meaning children from primary age through to sixth form can learn about climate change. And it's gone global, with teachers in scores of countries around the globe. In a moment, we'll speak to the UN and one of these teachers. But first, let's speak to Melanie Harwood herself. Good morning.
Good morning, Emma.
How did this idea come to you then?
I went to a dinner a year ago, and I met Angus Mackay, and we were chatting about climate change and what he was doing with UNITAR. And he spoke to me about a program where they were introducing children in Switzerland, were Skyping children in Ivory Coast in Africa, and they were discussing how climate change was affecting, them respectively. The children in Switzerland were saying, well, this is not so good, we can't ski anymore. And the children in Ivory Coast were saying, we have no fish, we have no trees, we have electricity blackouts. You can hear from my accent, I'm originally from South Africa. This hit me, and I went home, and then I sent him a message on WhatsApp, and I said, I've had a look at this video, and I have an idea. Can I speak to you about it? And he was like, at 3 a.m. in the morning, he came back and he said, what's the idea? And that was it. So we had a Skype with his team. My business partner, Denise Miser, and I, we had a chat, and we said, look, we've successfully launched an education program into schools in the United Kingdom, and we have this idea. So we went out to Geneva. We were introduced to all of the UNITAR teams. I think there's about 29 departments.
UNITAR is
it's actually UNCC Learn. It's the One United Nations Partnership for Climate Change Learning. And we introduced this idea, and we said, this is what we'd like to do. We think that we can create a climate change teacher course using content that you have already, and they are accredited by UNCCE Learn in partnership with Harvard Education. And let's create a cross-curricular climate curriculum. And everybody looked at me as if I was mad. But here we are. So we've launched it on the 22nd of April. More than 3,000 schools. We have an average of about between 50 and 80 schools signing up every day in the United Kingdom alone.
And so it's popular with the teachers, of course, because they want to obviously spread the word to the pupils.
Yes.
But the courses themselves, tell us more about what they learn, the pupils.
Okay, so how it works is the teachers are qualified. They do 5 courses, which is Children and Climate Change, Cities and Climate Change, Gender and Environment, Cities and Climate Change, and the International Legal Regime of Climate Change. This gives these teachers a really good grounding about all things that will be affecting these children. Those courses have then been split into about just over 2,000 lessons, and we've built a platform where these teachers then go on, choose lessons, and they can then take those lessons and use them in the way that they want to in their cross-curricular lessons throughout the curriculum. So they're learning about adaptation, mitigation, sustainability, how to design sustainable cities, all the SDGs, which is Sustainable Development Goals. They learn about the causes of climate change, all these things that most of us have not really considered. We read about climate change, we see the effects of it around us, and we don't quite comprehend it. So this is all content that's been created by hundreds of the top scientists and academics and individuals researching and actually out there on the front line working with the UN.
And how many UK schools are doing this?
At the moment, we have just over 3,000 UK schools that have signed up with a climate change teacher.
And how does this differ to what was already on the national curriculum? Because, of course, you would expect some of this to be covered by geography lessons.
So you're going to speak to Dr. Meryl Batchelder about that. So climate change is on the geography curriculum, but it's been on there for 20 years. And this is far more in depth. This gives children a preparation and an introduction to all that they need to be doing to adapt and to mitigate. So, for example, Fiona Cowan is a head teacher in Derbyshire, and she's created a climate curriculum for preschool and early years. So we're talking, she has little children that are 4 years old going outside with chalk, and they draw the planet, and they draw the oceans, and then they start discussing about how they feel about the planet, what they want to do, what they can change. So we're talking about climate change in a cross curricula. So it's everything. It's history, geography, science, maths, everything. So can I give you an example?
Yes,
because
please.
most people wouldn't quite comprehend it. If you're doing a maths lesson on percentages and ratios, you're going to be learning about percentages and ratios anyway. You might as well shift in a little bit about diminishing landmass in Bangladesh. Just so that you can comprehend, you can actually start seeing how percentages and ratios really work, and you can see the diminishing landmass, and you can start discussing, why is there that diminishing landmass? Who's causing that?
I suppose the issue around some of this is it political in that way then?
No, not at all.
Because it just to finish the point, in all seriousness, there are some. It's not a debate about whether it exists or not. That's very much America's type of debate.
Yeah.
It's very happy to say that's not the case in the UK. But there are debates, aren't there, around what is causing certain things. So how do you deal with that?
Well, I'm going to tell you one thing. I'm a mother, and I have a 12-year-old daughter. And all I know is that if my GP told me that my diet was going to cause my death, imminent death in 6 months' time, I would change my diet and I would start walking the dog. So
are you telling children not to fly?
I'm not telling children not to fly at all. I'm telling them to look at the scientific evidence that is there. That is, they can start thinking about it, and they can start deciding for themselves. This is not about brainwashing children at all.
No. And I'm not even putting that as the thought, but I'm saying if it's not analogous to what you just said about walking the dog, because the point is children don't get a choice necessarily, certainly at least until they're a bit older, about some of the things that they're involved in, like going on holiday.
You don't give children enough credit. Children are far more resilient and far more adaptive than we give them credit for. Children are...
Well, but they have to go on holiday with their parents if their parents are going away, because there isn't any care for them. And you try telling an overworked parent they can't go on their hot holiday.
Nobody's telling any parents that they cannot go on holiday. All we're doing is we're telling them, here are some interesting lessons, here's some information, and we're going to show you what is causing climate change, how you can adapt, you can live sustainably. Start buying foods without plastic covering. Let's start eating more veg. Let's eat less meat. Let's have a look at ways that we can mitigate. Should we be driving electric cars?
There's a whole industry, of course, around this as well, which they could think about jobs in. So that's another element.
Absolutely. I had no idea that in our country alone that our town councils are short of hundreds of planning officers, and these planning officers haven't been trained on the SDGs and how to mitigate and adapt.
SDGs,
Sustainable Development Goals. We're desperately looking for.
I haven't had the class yet, you see, so I have to make sure I'm across the acronyms.
I think you need to do it. I think everybody needs to do it.
Let's thank you very much for that. Let's bring in Angus Mackay here, a director at the United Nations Institute for Training and Research. Angus, tell us a bit more about why Melanie was granted UN backing.
Well, thanks, first of all, for having me on. These courses that we've been putting out for some years now are free for anyone and everyone. It's not exclusive in any sense. So, they've essentially been available for free in multiple languages for 5-6 years. I think Mel, the meeting with Mel was interesting because she had experience of working within the UK education system in a rather particular way. I was impressed by that. There was something that resonated. So we took it to the next step, and it's sort of grown gradually. I think the thing I would say here is that the UN, our primary focus is, of course, developing countries and countries in special circumstances. But the great thing about starting this off in the UK is because of the leadership role that the United Kingdom shows, not only at an international level, sort of politically and in the international meetings, but also I'm learning through the teachers themselves, because teachers have global networks themselves and they talk to each other around the world, and that's very interesting as well.
And for you, when you look at this sort of success of this, how will you measure it? How successful has it been already?
Well, I don't know when you can call something a success, but what I can say, is I've met some of the teachers who have ploughed through these 5 courses that Mel mentioned earlier, and it's about 25 hours of study. You have to do a test, an objective test, and you have to pass. That really strikes me as impressive, because they're busy people, they're dads, they're mums, and so that for me, the fact that we've even got a few thousand signed up is extraordinary, because of what they can then do in bringing that into the classroom. And let me just say one other thing, and that is that, when we talk about climate change, it's essentially been, to a large extent, the preserve of the scientists and maybe the international policymakers for too long. And the new front line really is the classroom, and we really need to recruit all teachers globally to this whole issue, and make it something much more intuitive, which is what I think Mel was talking about a moment ago when she talked about how it was integrated into all elements of the education system.
Thank you very much for that insight. Let's welcome now a science teacher into this, who's working in Northumberland, Dr. Meryl Batchelder, who you were just hearing the name of there at the beginning of our conversation. How did you get involved in this? And good morning.
Good morning. So I am a science teacher, and I've been aware of climate change since 1984, when I learned about it in geography. And I'm now 50, and I always thought that something would happen in my lifetime. The politicians would make the right decisions. The people in industry would make, difficult decisions economically, but maybe the right decisions for the planet. And I'm now sitting here, 3.5 decades later, and nothing has really happened. In fact, we're burning more oil than ever. So I was already talking about the Sustainable Development Goals that Mel was talking about in my classroom. And I'm quite active on Twitter, and I stumbled across something from the Educate Global program that just said, become a UN accredited climate change teacher. And it was a breath of fresh air that there was a course out there that could give me the best information possible in terms of, written by scientists, for teachers, for people like me, to get my kids in my classroom, the best information I could possibly give them. So it gives me some authority to say I have the best understanding of climate change as not an expert, but just as a teacher, that I need to give my kids the best I can possibly give them.
How much of this comes from the pupils? So you've explained why you had this in your mind of interest, but what do they say to you, and how much do they drive this?
Okay, we live in rural Northumberland. A lot of my kids are obviously, live in small towns and villages in a lovely part of the northeast. We're not in London. We don't see the school strikes quite as obviously, but the news does filter down from, amazing young people like Greta Thunberg. The actions of Extinction Rebellion have impacted even up in the northeast here. And I think, with that, and in the news and on TV programs, young people, even I teach from 9 to 13-year-olds in a middle school. Young people are getting much more aware, even if their parents aren't really speaking about it. So, I run environmental clubs at school, and they're always, lots and lots of pupils want to get involved, whether it's about saving water, whether it's about doing gardening, or whether it's about trying to make the school a more environmentally sustainable place. So I'd say a lot of it's being driven by the kids. I think having a passionate, environmentally interested teacher helps, but I'd say I've definitely seen, the kids starting to come up with their own questions, their own concerns to me as well.
And do you think they want to go into this as a industry or as jobs, or are you getting any sense of some of the older children's take on that?
Yes, I think that that idea of the fact that there's a real need for STEAM jobs, so science, technology, engineering, art, and maths. I think that there's, a real driver that kids realise they need to think about these sustainable solutions, and that involves aspects of all sorts of skills. So, I think that is a growing area. I hope so. We really need it.
Let me ask you then to come back to the creator of this, whose brainchild this was, Melanie Harwood. What support do you need from the government that you don't get, in the UK specifically?
We've been very, very lucky. I'm not really allowed to talk about it because we're launching something next week, which is going to be a game changer for this. To be completely honest with you, Emma, although the programme has already successfully launched, we are really keen to partner with a forward-thinking sponsor to help deliver a UN climate change teacher in every school, not just here in the UK, but worldwide. That's where we're going with this. We've had interest from schools in Italy, Russia, Germany, France. Goodness, we've even had, I have to mention this, one teacher, a head teacher in the United Arab Emirates, Asha Alexander, did the course 2 weeks ago. Last week, she told me that 300 teachers in her school are now UN-accredited climate change teachers. That is what's happening.
Well,
So,
I'll tell you something
it's
else that's just come in, though, because, of course, keen to hear from teachers on the front line of this. Adam in Worcester says, I'll tell you right now, I haven't got the time for a 20 to 25-hour course. The message is we need to do more as teachers. That's always the message. I've heard it all before. In capital letters, this is from a teacher in the UK, we haven't got any more time. It is not just the responsibility of teachers. How about parents go on these courses? Why don't they take more responsibility? What would you say to Adam?
Absolutely, Emma. That's what's happening. So Dr. Ben King down in Exeter, who's one of our very first climate change teachers, has just sent me a message on Skype saying that 3 of the teachers have contacted him, and one parent in particular has contacted him asking, they are halfway through the course. Parents are picking up that baton. But interestingly, teachers are making this time. Many, many teachers are making this time. We are amazed. I never, ever expected teachers to give up 15 to 20 hours of their time. Some teachers are contacting us and saying, can we just do one of the courses? And we're saying, go for it. If you just want to dip your toes in, just do children and climate change. Just get that introductory knowledge. It's interesting. One of our head teachers, Rebecca Stacey in Cumbria, she said, I'll do one course. She tweeted at 5 p.m. that afternoon. She said, I locked the door and I did all of them. She said, this has never happened to me before. So this is what's happening. Once teachers get in and they see the knowledge, they start getting into it. I know that I was screaming at the screen when I was doing gender and environment. Cities and climate change was one of my favorites of all of them. I've learned a lot, and I'm a mum, and now my 12-year-old daughter is working her way through cities and climate change. We have another teacher at the UTC in Workington, and every single student in that FE college is going to be doing the Cities and Climate Change course.
Melanie Harwood, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Emma.
Angus Mackay there from the UN, and Dr. Meryl Batchelder talking about her experience of teaching this. Now, I did say we were about to make a bit of history here on the programme with everyone being in agreement over Caroline Lucas.